In your article, you mentioned like 10 levers that people can pull. Are these like universally effective for all the different stages, or are there some techniques that work better at like early stages versus later stages? What do you think?
That's a really good question. Those are generally proven techniques that could increase conversion, but for some products it will work, for some it will not. But yeah, you need to have a good rationale behind it.
We have Pierre Jean Hilong here with me. And Pierre has worked in product for several years, including companies like BlablaCar. So he has a lot of hands-on experience with large B2C products, mobile apps as well. Pierre, can you maybe fill us in a little bit on your experience, your career journey? How did you get to becoming the, consultant for product companies as you are now?
Yeah, a very good question. So yeah, first, hello everyone, and happy to be there today. So yeah, my name is Pierre Jean. I think it's very complicated for people who are not French to pronounce a name like Pierre Jean. So you can call me Pierre. That's perfectly fine. But yeah, I started to work on product and growth 6 or 7 years ago. I started my career at the beginning, mostly working for very early stage startup. So like between 10 to 20 people at the beginning, mostly in B2B. But then I started to move more on the B2C side and started to work on in larger companies. So you mentioned BlablaCar. I spent 3 years at BlablaCar, which is now quite a big company, at least for a European scale up. It was, I think, 800 employees when I was there. But yeah, I work on many different products, B2B, B2C. Now I'm mostly specializing in product-led SaaS and B2C mobile apps, because that's the type of product I love the most at the moment. And yeah, I started to work as a freelancer, mainly on product and growth topic since a few months now. So yeah, we are now.
Super interesting, like a bit of a foreign land to me, because I specialize in B2B products. I've been working in B2B for the past, I would say, 7 or 8 years. So I'm not that familiar with B2C mobile apps. But the reason why we're talking here today and why we're in general starting to, pick up more conversations and looking into research and insights on B2C mobile apps is because UserPilot, which is the company we're on the VP of marketing at, has recently launched its mobile features. So, mobile onboarding, mobile product analytics, and mobile in-app feedback collection tools. So previously we were focusing mostly on B2B SaaS companies that had web apps, but now we're also venturing into mobile apps. And as we know, mobile apps are more popular with B2C rather than B2B. Like, you don't really do your accounting on mobile unless you absolutely have to, especially if you're doing it professionally for lots and lots of clients. So it's like a new territory for me a little bit. And very interested professionally, but also, of course, I use a lot of mobile apps myself. Pierre, how many mobile apps do you have? Do you know?
Wow. That's a really good question. I think I probably have, because on my phone, I probably have 3 pages, 3 screens with mobile apps. So I would say it's between probably 60 to 70. I don't know exactly.
60, 70.
And that's always super interesting to look at the number of mobile apps you really use, let's say, even on not on a daily basis, but even on a weekly basis. And if you look at that, it generally, 5 to 10. So there is a big difference if you look at the daily usage, retention, and so on of like really the most used mobile apps and the one you use just a bit less frequently. So that's always interesting, and that's a good question.
Yeah, that was a leading question, and you definitely read my mind, because my next question was, how many do you actually use, right? So you said maybe 5, 6. So it's like 10% of all the apps, less than 10% that you have on your phone. And for me, it's pretty much the same. but I'm not getting any communication from the other apps that I'm not using at the same time. And one day I will probably go in and like look at the screen and how many times I have to scroll and think like, why do I keep all these other apps on my phone?
Yeah.
So this is the topic of our conversation, right? Today, the 3-step process to improve the awareness to activation funnel conversion in specifically B2C mobile apps. What kind of made you like, get into this topic and start, researching this topic specifically? Because you created this framework. We have an article that you wrote on our blog as well. I'm curious, why did you get so interested in conversion?
Yeah, really good question, because I think the context was quite important when I started to work on this like framework and this article. So it was when I was working at BlablaCar. So BlablaCar, it's a carpooling app. It's a bit like Uber, but the driver, they are not professional. So basically, you have people going to the app, publishing a carpool ride. So that's a driver, and you have passenger who can book the ride. And I was working like on the Western Europe markets, and we were wondering like, okay, what are the next big growth lever that we can activate in the next 12 months? So we were a bit in the brainstorming and road mapping phase. And one thing we wanted to explore was how do we convert people that we acquire? So between people like hearing about BlablaCar and people who really start to use the product, what's the conversion rate? How many people do we lose at each step, and so on? And we quickly realized that we were not super mature on all the funnel steps and conversion, depending on the type of user, the country. Like the funnel could be a bit different depending on if you are a driver, if you are a passenger, depending on the country where you sign up to the app, and so on. So we needed something like very clear to map the journey from when you discover the product. So basically that could be through an ad, through, I don't know, word of mouth, whatever the acquisition channel is, to starting really using it. And we realized when working on this that we had a lot of steps, which all made sense, but we wanted to know, okay, where do we lose user the most, and what can we improve in this flow? Why do we lose people at this specific step? Does it make sense? Is it normal to lose people? Why do we lose them? So yeah, the idea was to have a complete mapping of the funnel between awareness to activation. And yeah, the idea is to have a diagnostic, and after that you have your diagnostic, you can find the solutions.
Yeah, so creating, this map, the user journey map, right, as we would call it, would be the first step. My question would be like how to create it, of course, like what are the best ways that product teams can create this user journey and identify the drop-off points?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because you have all those templates of user journey mapping, and generally this is like a PowerPoint template. You have some boxes with the step of the journey, some emotion curves. Sometimes that's something which is really classic. Like I think we have all seen templates like that, and I think it's a good start to brainstorm a bit about your product. But the problem with those kind of framework, it's really hard to see what's behind. Like you have a framework, but you don't see the product, you don't see the screen you are talking about. For example, if you look at all the steps you have between people signing up to your app and people really start using it, you probably have at least 10 steps. If you done everything, you don't have only 2 or 3 steps. So for me, one thing that was really key was to name each step. So for example, sign up, verify your email, I don't know, give a name to your account, start your onboarding step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because generally you have many screens for the onboarding where we collect some information about you and so on. And having the screenshot of the app on top of the name of the step was super key for me, because it makes you like visualize perfectly what you are talking about. Okay, what is onboarding completion step 1? So it's this specific screen, and yeah, I can visualize it and see maybe what could be improved. So yeah, the idea was to have something which was like really realistic and the closest possible to what the real product experience is, and not a simple framework on a PowerPoint slide, because that's super difficult to really feel what people experience during all this journey without having the screenshot of the app behind it.
Yeah, that's a great point that, most of these user journey the maps are pretty abstract, right?
Yeah,
And they show, like the milestones, but they don't show what the experience
exactly.
exactly like. And this is what, the screenshots of the actual pages, screens can help, the product managers visualize and then maybe understand a bit more like where are people actually getting stuck
Exactly.
here. And sometimes it's not like between these two milestones, there are, as you said, 7, 8, 10 steps. Um, so why do you think, most product teams don't really act on these journeys? Is it because they are not detailed enough? They're too abstract? Are there any other reasons?
Yeah, I think it depends on probably the size and a bit the maturity of the company you're working on.
Hmm.
But sometimes, so if the company is relatively small, generally, you don't have like that many people working on this kind of journey. So you probably have only 1 or 2 product managers, maybe the CEO still working
Mm.
on that at the moment. So it's relatively easy, but at a certain stage, you have many people on different parts of the experience. So it's really hard to have someone who is like, okay, I will map the entire funnel, because maybe I'm only working on, I don't know, activation or monetization as a product manager. So I don't have all the funnel in mind. So ownership, I think, is really important. Having someone who is kind of responsible of at least having a full funnel view of the user journey, that's really important. Um, and yeah, that's the first step, having a clear ownership, making sure each team doesn't have a different journey. So you need a lot of communication, because
Hmm.
you can have, I don't know, a product team and a marketing team working on a journey, each on their side. So it's not really actionable. You have conflicting issues. So yeah, it's super important to have ownership and clarity communication about, okay, that's our user journey. This is shared with the company, and everyone can access it.
Hmm. So yeah, maturity of the product team, and then
Yeah,
also like awareness in all
yeah,
the stakeholders. Um, okay, so let's say the team has now created a good, detailed enough user journey map, and they are all aware of where the users are getting potentially stuck. What next? How do they identify what are the most important levers to improve the conversion rates?
yeah. So the idea, once you have mapped like all the user journey, is to look at the conversion rate between each step. So that's
Mhm.
pretty basic, but generally, that's a simple thing, but that's the type of thing you need to do if you want to have a good overview of what is working and what is not working. So yeah, basically between step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, look at the conversion between each step. And what you can do too is look at the conversion between, let's say, 2 big milestones. For example, account
Mhm.
creation and activation. So you have conversion between each step, and you have conversion between like big milestone, let's say. So yeah, the idea is to have a clear overview. Um, when you have the conversion rate, you can look at 2 different things. You have the steps where you lost the majority of user, and that's one thing. So for example, if you are losing 50% of user at one step, that's big. So that's something you need to address. And the second thing is asking the question, is it normal or not normal to lose people at this step? So for example, if you lose, I don't know, but more than 20% at the step verify your email, it's very likely that you have a product problem, because it's
Mhm.
not normal to lose more than 20% of user at this step of the funnel. There are steps where you will lose a lot of people, and that's quite normal. That's the life of a product. You can convert 100% of the user that started to create an account or discover your product. So that's pretty normal. But yeah, the idea is to make sure you have a clear view of the conversion between all the steps and analyze if it's normal or not to lose that number of users between each step. And once you have this overview, what you can do is start iterating, start brainstorming. Okay, what can we improve on? So sometimes there are things that are quite obvious. Let's say you have UX, which is pretty unclear, the copy is confusing, that's something which is quite obvious. You see that you lose a lot of users at this step because people just don't understand. You can start you can look at a few user recording, for example, and you see that this screen is broken and not functioning. So that's something you can start iterating on, and that's pretty obvious. But sometimes there are things that are not really obvious. Everything seems to be going well, and that's the most complicated part because it's hard to find the right growth level in that case. And generally, you need something radically different. When everything looks nice, functioning well, you need to do something radically different. So the idea is to start brainstorming, see, okay, what can we improve? Should we just do some optimization, or should we do something radically different if we really want to move the needle on, let's say, this step of the user journey? So for example, acquisition to activation.
Okay, right. So testing different tactics to improve the conversion rates at specific steps, having like this focus. So you don't start from like, oh, where do we even start? You first have like the clear map, clear like root points, and then you start testing different hypotheses. In your article, you mentioned like 10 levers that people can pull. I'm going to like bring up a few here. So you mentioned the CRO techniques to increase conversions at the different points, value proposition iterations, urgency, social proof, interactive demo, retargeting, educational content, personalization, gamification, CRM communications, calling campaigns. Are these like universally effective for all the different stages, or are there some techniques that work better at like early stages versus later stages? What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question because so in an article, it's hard to be specific. So those are generally proven techniques that could increase conversion, but for some products it will work, for some it will not. So it's really important to not read an article and be like, okay, I saw that calling campaign could be a good CRO technique. Let's do it. No, you should have a clear rationale behind it. Why are you doing a calling campaign? For example, that's the type of thing. Do you have the phone number of your user? Sometimes you don't collect them. For many mobile apps, you don't even collect the mobile phone. So you can discard this. So I would say generally, yes, that's something you can at least consider. But you need to have a good rationale behind it. If you want to do a CRM campaign, why are you doing it? Do you already have one? For example, if you don't have any CRM campaign in place, why? What type of CRM campaign should you build? How will you test it? You really need a strong rationale and not just take a list of tactics and try to apply them. So a good exercise to do for that is generally to try to, of course, you can do user interviews. Try to understand, for example, your specific type of user, your persona. What are the channels they use the most? Because, for example, you can have some personas that don't read emails or don't answer to the phone. It depends of your product. So having user interviews, looking what you already do, what you have confidence in, depending on your type of product is super, super important. So I would say you have 10 tactics, but I think if you do a clear prioritization, generally you will only go for 2 or 3 because that's possible to do all 10.
Yeah,
Just lose time. So the idea is to prioritize the ones that best suits your product, your users.
Yeah, of course. Like probably testing all 10 on their specific bottleneck is not going to be the best idea. But just to kind of maybe bring the conversation a bit closer to my area of expertise, so B2B companies with longer sales cycles. would you say any of these tactics make sense, especially for like B2B, maybe more sales-led companies?
Yeah, that's a good question because that's really the type. So the article was made primarily so for mobile apps, and
Mm-hmm.
I think practically everything is applicable to a product-led SaaS
Mm-hmm.
because those are the type of product that have quite straightforward, let's say, journey. So generally, you take, let's say, between 1 to 5 minutes to if you do everything in a single session, you can do everything in a few minutes. But yeah, for a B2B sales company, it's a bit different um, because what you consider a conversion is really different. So generally, it will not be people signing up to your product, but more people booking a demo.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think you can have a lot of tactics that you can use. So, for example, personalization, whatever the type of product you have. For example, if you have a personalized landing page with the name of the prospect,
Right.
of course, that will increase the likelihood to build the
Mm-hmm.
demo. Because we know that's proven that personalization, at least in most cases, that's not always true. But generally, when you personalize something, with relevant content for the targeted user, generally you will have a better conversion rate. We also talk about interactive demo. That's something that can be really effective for B2B sales that SaaS product. You can have on a landing page an interactive demo of your product, which will give a sense of, okay, I love this product or this is not for me. So that's the type of thing you can do. Retargeting, of course, that's really applicable to even if you have salespeople who are doing the retargeting job. It's not an ad retargeting people, but the salespeople doing it. Yeah, that's really applicable. So I think practically everything is adaptable. This is just a bit a different way to do it. It's less digital, maybe a bit more human, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's the only difference.
Yeah, so add more touches, add more like human
Yeah.
interactions in the process. So circling back to mobile apps again, and I'm hearing, especially from the PLG prospects, who would love to run some experiments, and increase the conversion rate, especially at later stages of the funnel, once the users have signed up and they want them to activate. I hear from these people that they don't have the budget for this. And then
Yeah.
I'm sometimes confused because they have massive budgets for acquisition, right? Massive ad budgets. But then they say, oh no, like spending $300 on a tool that would allow us to, like run experiments and improve the conversion rate for the trial users, that's too much. And it's, honestly shocking because why drive all these signups if you then don't activate them? And these people are just going to leave and not use your product and obviously not convert into paying customers. So, what is your tip on getting the stakeholders to understand that activation is actually the most important, metric rather than just the sign up?
Yeah, I think that's a really common situation.
Mm,
And it's quite easy to explain that if you double the number of sign-up, you will double the revenue. Sometimes it's not true because the conversion rate, so you acquire bad quality user and so on.
yeah.
But generally, you can have a clear rationale saying, okay, today we acquire 100 user. If tomorrow we acquire 200 user, we will double the revenue. It's quite easy to understand for every CEO, every leader. You have a lot of other parameters, but I think you get the point. For
Mm-hmm.
activation, it's a bit different because let's say you have a product manager saying, okay, we are doing this project because we are activating 20% of our user and we want to activate, let's say, 23 or 24. Generally, the error people made is that this increase is not like closely linked to revenue. So that's why it's not prioritized and you don't have budget for that. So I would say that if you want to prioritize a conversion project, the output of the project, like the what success look like for this project is not really the uplift of conversion, but it's the revenue generated by the uplift of conversion. So that's super important if you are a product manager, for example, working on activation. If you are working on a project to increase activation, always do a business case, always do kind of a forecast, saying, okay, if we improve activation, but let's say 10%, it will bring, I don't know what's the number, but X more revenue. So it's very important to look closely how much more revenue you can generate by improving activation, and with that you can have more budgets. Because it's really easy to see the cost of a new tool, the cost of a new experiment. That can be like financial cost, but also human cost, like human resources. So yeah, it's super important to have a good business case and make sure you talk about revenue when you are presenting a conversion rate improvement project.
And understanding the impact of activation versus, like acquisition rate on basically revenue. Because as you said, hey, okay, acquisition like is tied to revenue, but so is activation. And activation, I've read on some studies, like, has the strongest impact on ARR, like 12 months down the road. Because if people don't activate, they typically, don't stick around. That's like natural. But it's also it's also about understanding the CAC, right? And maybe like showcasing the flip side that, hey, if we increase the spend on activation, but we don't resolve the problems with acquisition, like actually our CAC will increase, but our revenue will not increase proportionally, or may even decrease, because our resources, a lot of companies have higher activation rate when the acquisition number is smaller, because they still use like CSMs to help people activate. For instance, they use like hands-on tactics. But if the number of signups increases, they sometimes actually the activation rate drops if they don't have the right systems. So that can backfire. Your CAC will increase, but your revenue may not necessarily increase if you don't solve the bottlenecks and the problems that we mentioned that are now drawn on the user journey map, right? And we understand need to be addressed. Great. Like, what is your favorite, activation lever personally, and what do you think is the most underutilized in 2025?
Yeah. That's a very good question. I think there are many of them, but one thing that I'm currently working on is how can we use positive friction to increase activation. So we have all heard, if you work in product or marketing, that it's good to remove friction. We don't want to add friction to the user experience. And in most cases, this is generally super true. So for example, if someone is landing on your software or your mobile app, you don't want to add unnecessary friction. That doesn't make sense. But if we talk about some certain phases of the journey, so for example, the onboarding, I found that adding a positive friction at a certain point is super useful if you look the result after. So a very concrete example is collecting information about the user, like the use case, the job title, what do you want to achieve with the product, how did you hear about us? So those are many steps. So for example, you can have, I don't know, 7, 8 questions or 7, 8 screens, depending on how you package everything. With friction that are not really necessary to access the product, because you just need maybe an email to access and use the product. But when you have more information about the user, what he wants to achieve, who he is, and so on, you can personalize the experience. So, for example, I don't know, but let's say you are on Notion or Miro, you can push a relevant template to kickstart the experience. You can send personalized communication. So, for example, the email sequence that you will send after will not be the same if you are, I don't know, CTO or an accountant. That's really not the same use case and job title.
100%.
So that will generally, if you look at the conversion it will generally decrease a bit the conversion at the beginning of the funnel, but it will improve a lot activation, engagement, and so on. So that's why it's really key to have a large view on the funnel. But I think, yeah, especially if you're working on a B2B product, that's a bit less true in B2C. Depends of the type of product. But make sure people commit and you have a lot of information on them to then personalize the experience. That's, yeah, the whole point of having a positive friction to better shape the experience after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's an amazing piece of advice. I love it. We've been doing the same and observing the same. Especially in B2B, you don't want a lot of unmotivated users, right? Because if someone is so, right, like unmotivated that they won't tell you what is their use case, what do they want to achieve when signing up, then probably they're not so keen on achieving it. So you don't want to be wasting your resources on users like that. So that's the first reason. And the second, as you mentioned, adding this little bit of friction at the beginning goes a super long way in then improving activation. We do the same at a user pilot. We ask our users, like, what is their use case? And then we have, like, what's your job to be done? We have like 4 jobs to be done. So, improving user onboarding and activation rate. Then understanding what your users are doing inside your product, right? Improving product adoption or collecting user feedback. And then obviously, if someone says collecting user feedback, we're going to lead them straight into how to create an in-app survey rather than showing them how to use product analytics, right? Or how to use the in-app engagement suite and vice versa. So like the journey after answering these questions is completely different. We are actually planning to add another option, which is like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Some users might know. Yeah, what they want to do. So these are probably ones that need a more, but that also gives you feedback. Do they need more like interactive demo where you're going to just show them around, give them an overview, maybe a quick video of everything you can do with the product? So it's more educational use case rather than transactional use cases where people are very clear what they want and you just lead them there. So this actually reduces the time to value, and you want to spend 2 seconds more than to spend 2 minutes less on seeing features that you're not interested in, right? So that's good for everyone. A question that I can't fail to ask is, what about AI? Like, some people are saying that AI will completely change the way we use products, that we won't be using them as we are used now, that we'll be talking to agents and the agents will be using software. What do you think about it? How will, AI change the way we engage with products? Is this advice still going to be valid, 1-2 years down the road?
Yeah. I think if we look at like the basics of product, of growth, and so on, I think it will not really change. Like having a good product taste, understanding what your user want to achieve, discussing with them, that will still be valid. I think even in 100 years, it was valid 20, 30 years ago. So those like the basics. But if we talk about specifically about AI, I think if we look at what people expect, especially if you are working in a tech company, so a bit the personnel like us, I would say, we expect now, if we are signing up to a new SaaS, to have AI features. So now it's really, I think it's quite necessary, I would say. Depends on the type of product for sure. But if you look at all the productivity products, now everyone has AI features, and for many of them, that's a way to increase activation and reduce a bit the let's say the bar to start learning the product. For example, if we take I don't know, but if we talk about Canva, for example, now you can create design with a prompt. So that's really faster for a new user to start creating on Canva that it was before you, because you can, at least do the foundation with a prompt instead of a template, for example. So I think it will change a bit how you can increase activation, increase engagement. So for that, super useful. But yeah, I think the basics will stay the same. It's just that people expect to have AI in many products now. So yeah, the idea is to say, okay, do we integrate an AI feature? Why? So yeah, but I would say the basics will not change, and all the advice of understanding the user journey, mapping the conversion rate, and so on, that will still be valid in many, many, many years.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I do hope though that products will become more intuitive because sometimes,
Mm.
even the product we are using now for the webinars, like I had to go in, I had to set like the chat live, I had to click a lot of
Yeah,
settings, and then I had to like there was this button at the bottom, save the settings, as if you didn't want to save the settings, right? Like you just came to change them as an exercise for your fingers. So, like I still feel that a lot of products have a lot of manual, like make you do a lot of manual work that is very repetitive, right? And they don't really
I agree.
learn, especially learning patterns. That doesn't happen at all, right? So I do hope that in the future, even though like some usage patterns we probably want to keep the same, yeah. Like we don't want to be using mobile phones for everything. We don't want to be using
Yeah,
voice for everything, right? Like imagine shouting at your mobile, like to do your accounts and like talking out loud in the office. Like you couldn't get any work done if everyone was using voice,
yeah.
in the office, for instance. So I think some patterns will not change radically, but I do hope that products will become smarter thanks to AI, like through like these patterns and just like responding to the user a bit more.
And one thing that is very true, I think, um, I, I don't know if it's already the case. I think it's a bit too soon. But let's say maybe in a few years, I think you will be able to automate a lot of tasks that you are doing
Mm.
currently with the software where you spend time. So, for example, there are some metrics maybe that we should think about analyzing a bit differently. So, for example, if you look at time spent using the product, if it's an AI agent doing the work for you, you still have the
Mm.
same output, but you don't spend too much time on the product. So
Sure.
that's the example of metric time spent using the product that will not be really relevant anymore, because that's an agent doing the work, but the output is still the same, so you can still price it the same as it was. So yeah, it depends, of course, on every specific product, what's the use case. But yeah, for some use cases, that might think how you look at the metrics. What do you want to optimize for?
Yeah, we will need to relearn a lot of things and change like our benchmarks, that for sure. As you said, like with the time spent in app
Yeah,
session duration is like a common,
yeah,
proxy for engagement. The same with logins, for instance. Maybe, there will be a lot of apps that will be API based and we will be probably connecting them to like the master agent somewhere.
yeah,
But we may not need to log in to the app at all, right? We probably will have a few master apps, like maybe ChatGPT
yeah,
will be one of them, and you will be just plugging a lot of APIs to it to do certain things in the background. So,
yeah,
um,
very like same.
mm, product managers will probably need to rethink what is the real measure of user engagement and probably the outputs, right? And actually, is the
Yeah,
user achieving what they want to achieve or just doing things? Yeah, will be the kind of mindset shift. Um, because these days we focus a lot on these proxies and we focus on, are people clicking on this button? Are they using a
yeah,
feature? And everything is click based because that's how we track events, right? But we're not really asking ourselves even, are the users getting the outcomes they are expecting and getting the value? Um, yeah, so that will probably change because the users will be clicking a lot less.
yeah.
Mm.
And again, that's the whole point of saying, okay, make sure you are looking at the right metrics, because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, for many products, it's not necessary to have people spending a lot of time in your product. If you are a social network, of course, that's super important. You want people to spend as much time as possible scrolling, looking at videos, and so on. But I don't know if you are Airbnb. I don't think they are looking at the time spent. I think it's even better if people don't spend too much time in the product, because that will probably be a signal that they directly found what they wanted what they wanted to book. So that's more the signal of a good user experience than a bad one. So that's I think depending on the type of product you have, you should really think about what are we looking at, what are we optimizing for. And when we talk about conversion rates, CRO, sometimes, for example, make sure you are not optimizing for a metric that's not the right one.
100%. And that's a funny conundrum for some apps, right? Like, think of dating apps, right? If someone uninstalls your app, it means they were like ultimately, well, either they got really fed up or they were successful and they actually, accomplished the goal of using your product. So that is probably the most ironic situation. But I totally agree that sometimes the metrics that, in general, we say are indicative of success or high engagement may not be. Like, if I click a lot, it may also mean I'm lost.
Confused.
Confused. These may be rage clicks. Someone always needs to dive deeper, maybe watch some session recordings.
Definitely.
Talk to users, right? So with that, on that note, I wonder if any of our participants here would love to ask any questions. So we have the Q&A and chat section here. Let's wait a couple of minutes. And if not, what is the best way to reach out to you, Pierre Jean?
I think LinkedIn is the best way.
LinkedIn.
Normally, I try at least to be reactive. So you can send me a LinkedIn invite or directly a message if we are already connected. Happy to talk. So LinkedIn I think is the best way.
Perfect. I will include a link to your LinkedIn profile in the follow-up email. We had a lot of people that signed up, but presumably not everyone could make it today, as usual. So I'm sure some people will be reaching out to you afterwards, after watching the replays as well, with some questions. And if we don't have any coming up right now live, then I'm going to thank you so much for all the insights and all the knowledge that you shared with us here today and in the article. And I'm looking forward to learning more from you and following you and your further journey on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, Pierre.
Thank you, Emilia. It was a pleasure to be here with you and the user pilot community. Maybe see you soon.
See you soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.